Ever since the first Dark Souls game was released in the West in October 2011, a bunch of people have been talking about its story online. If you're a fan of FromSoft games, you have definitely heard of creators such as VaatiVidya. These creators have theorized and made the lore accessible to anyone who doesn't want to read through 700 item descriptions. However, there are some things that many of these creators seem to gloss over and not mention while talking about the story of Dark Souls. Those being the messages of Dark Souls and what the series really was about. Nearly every really good story-driven game relays a message to the player even if it isn't that obvious at first. Some games are pure political commentaries about how needless violence only fuels further conflict, or violence breeds violence. So Dark Souls, a game whose story is so well written, must have a message behind it. And it does. Dark Souls' universe is notoriously known for being cruel and dark. It's a dark fantasy series after all, and one of the main inspirations for Dark Souls is Berserk, a dark fantasy manga series. The world of Dark Souls is in this constant cycle of death and renewal. These two themes, death and renewal, are really important points in Dark Souls, because ever since the Four Lords have found their great souls within the First Flame, the time in the world of Dark Souls has become a cycle. The Age of Fire always happens first. In the foggy world right before the Age of Fire, there were no men, no gods, and no other beings that ruled the surface besides the dragons. Every other being lived underground in perpetual darkness, but then, one day, there was light. A fire. This fire is called the First Flame, and it is the thing every single thing in the Dark Souls trilogy revolves around. Right after its appearance, four beings were blessed with great power. Great Lord Souls. These four lords were Nito, the Witch of Izalith, Gwyn, and the Furtive Pygmy, so easily forgotten. These four lords alongside their armies fought the dragons and they just annihilated them. After the lords won, the world essentially blossomed. Kingdoms were formed, lords were established, and people were enslaved. Yes, even though the spectacular Age of Fire might seem like the perfect utopia, it really isn't. It is paradise for the gods and their soldiers like Gwyn, Artorias, and Gwyn's Silver Knights, but it's clear that not everything is perfect. In Dark Souls 1's DLC, you encounter Hawkeye Go, a giant and also one of Gwyn's four renowned knights, alongside Artorias the Abysswalker, Lord's Blade Siren, and Dragonslayer Ornstein. However, looking closely at Go, you see that his helmet's eye slits are stuffed with resin. Cruelty against giants and humans is a big theme in Dark Souls, and just contributes to its indifferent universe. Go, despite being a mighty renowned knight, had his enemies within Gwyn's kingdom. They stuffed his helmet with resin and convinced him that he was blind. But I also mentioned humans. Humans in the Dark Souls trilogy are the descendants of the Furtive Pygmy, one of the lords that discovered a great soul within the First Flame, the Dark Soul. Oh, it's the name of the game! I should say that what I'm about to say next about the lore might not fit your interpretation, since Dark Souls leaves most things up to interpretation. The Furtive Pygmy used the Dark Soul to create humanity, which are these dark beings with white eyes. Every descendant of the Pygmy that has this humanity inside of them is human. Though the gods feared this dark within humanity, and they have done everything they can to limit its power. Like creating a ring of flame that forms around the dark humanity, the Dark Sign, and erasing all of their accomplishments from history itself before locking away the Furtive Pygmies in a city, far, far away until the end of time itself. This covered up truth seems to be noticed by Aldia, scholar of the First Sin, one of the first non-immortal beings in the Dark Souls universe to openly speak against the Age of Fire.
Once, the Lord of Light banished dark and all that stemmed from humanity. And men assumed a fleeting form. These are the roots of our world. Men are props in stage of life, and no matter how tender, how explicit, the lie will remain a lie.
This is the first era of the cycle. Next comes the part I like to call the Age of Decay that only gets worse throughout the series. I'd put the start of this age at the moment pure and raw humanity emerged from Manus' body, and the moment the first flame began to fade, since I'm assuming these two events happened pretty close to each other. As raw and unshackled humanity emerged from Manus, one of the first descendants of the furtive pygmy, it formed the Abyss. The Abyss was pure darkness and what the gods were terrified of, and as the first flame slowly faded, the darkness, not just the darkness of the Abyss, would threaten the whole of Lordran, the kingdom of the gods themselves. Afraid of this, Gwyn did what he had to do and sacrificed himself to the flame, which returned the world to its old state. For just a bit, because Gwyn prolonged the inevitable. He didn't bring an end to anything, his sacrifice made things a lot worse because he disrupted the balance of the world, breaking the cyclic nature of it, causing it to slowly begin decaying. One example of this decay is the Undead Curse. This curse was born out of the imbalance caused by Gwyn's sacrifice as the world fought back to fix its cyclic nature. This curse caused the humans who were afflicted by it to become unkillable. Those who were killed would just rise up after an unexplained amount of time and just continue on, as if nothing really happened. Now, after this age of decay, there's always supposed to be an age of darkness, but Gwyn's sacrifice prevented that from happening. This is the state of the world in every Dark Souls game. Now, as the world slowly decays with small ages of fire taking place in between, the undead search for purpose in a broken world, and this brings me to my first point. Dark Souls is, in one way, about searching for meaning in a cruel world. In every single Dark Souls game, we see these people, most of them undead, that try to find meaning in a cruel universe. Some of them just give up, but some continue to search for things they hold dear. Hollowing is another message about searching for meaning. All undead will one day go hollow, but losing purpose and meaning causes undead to hollow before their time has run out. The hollowing process isn't perfectly explained, but it slowly causes the undead to go mad until they die one last time and lose everything, becoming husks of themselves. Even the name, hollowing, refers to how the person slowly becomes hollow on the inside, losing all emotions and everything that once made them human. The crestfallen warrior in Dark Souls 1 is first seen in Firelink Shrine, where he is what his name implies, crestfallen. He has failed his task of ringing the bells of awakening, so he now just wallows in misery, sitting on the steps of Firelink Shrine having lost all purpose. Eventually, after sitting there while the chosen undead rings all of the bells of awakening, causing Frampt to appear, the crestfallen decides to do something about Frampt. And he ventures into New Londo, the flooded city beneath Firelink Shrine filled with the ghosts of the damned. We can only guess what happened to him, but the next time we see him, he is fully hollowed, gone mad. Then there are other undead, such as Sigmar of Katarina, that haven't lost their purpose in life. Sigmar wants to be a hero, that is his dream. But every time he tries to be the hero, to help you, the chosen undead, you deprive him of that achievement. His pride slowly diminishes until nothing is left. He becomes a husk, a hollow, and attacks his very own daughter who came to Lordran to find him. Unlike the crestfallen warrior, Sigmar was fully able to find his purpose, but the surprise of discovering that his daughter had followed him all the way from his home country of Katarina, and losing that pride and self-confidence and meaning led to him hollowing. He was a hero until the very end. Not everyone goes hollow though. Some people are able to fully find their purpose in life. In Dark Souls 3, at the very beginning of the game, we see Hawkwood, the deserter, nearly crestfallen, having lost all meaning in the even further decayed world of Lothric.
Ah, another one roused from the sleep of death. Well, you're not alone. We unkindled are worthless. Can't even die right. Gives me conniptions. And they'd have us seek the lords of Cinder and return them to their moulding thrones. But we're talking true legends, with the metal to link the fire. We're not fit to lick their boots.
Hawkwood deserted the undead legion of Farron long ago, so at one point he was an Abyss Watcher. He still wears their uniform after all. After watching the Ashen One defeat his old compatriots, he leaves his shield at Firelink Shrine, symbolizing him leaving behind his miserable self, and he picks up his old sword again. You only meet him again after finding the Twinkling Dragon Torso Stone. He has found his purpose, to become a dragon, and has stopped himself from going hollow.
I should have known. Well, I've decided to stop running from my fate. Loathe me all you like. I shall take what makes you dragon. You are a dragon. More dragon than I.
He dies by your hands at the exact location where his fellow Abyss Watchers whom he deserted died, right next to the entrance of the catacombs of Karthus. But in his final moments, he isn't mad or depressed. He doesn't curse you. He dies, knowing that he at least died while seeking his purpose and place in life. As Gwyn gave his own body to the first flame in an attempt to rekindle it, he forsook the world, destining it to an eternity of broken cycles and creating the cycle of rekindling. When the flame began to fade, every single time a new powerful being would give themselves to it, just to keep it burning a little longer. But it is impossible to endlessly rekindle the same flame, as eventually it will grow weak, and people will slowly begin to realize the futility of it all. Dark Souls 3 is all about how linking the first flame is futile and just prolongs suffering. Throughout the entire game, you'll see people telling and begging you to give your body to the flame. But is it correct? Are endless, uncompleted cycles what the world truly needs? Or is it something else? It's strange really that two brothers that were supposed to give themselves to the flame abandoned their duty. What's even more strange is that when the first flame itself brought old Lords of Cinder back to life, beings that had linked the first flame previously, they also refused to rekindle the flame. Yhorm went back to the profaned capital only to see what had happened. He had no one to rule over. The Abyss Watchers went back to the place that they were supposed to guard and saw that the Abyss was still present. Them linking the first flame hadn't done anything at all. Before Aldrich, the Devourer of Gods, had even linked the first flame, he had had visions of an Age of the Deep Sea, so an Age of Dark. However, he was forced to link the flame. When he was revived, he presumably heard of Gwyndolin and went to Anor Londo to devour him, where he still waits to this day. And finally, there was a tiny man who linked the first flame, Ludlif. He is the only one to be seen actually returning to link the flame in Dark Souls 3. While this might make Ludlif seem like a reasonable, rational and brave man, Ludlif is a fool. Just like Yhorm, he is part of a race the gods have done everything to oppress, and he still willfully returns to fulfill their will. But unlike Yhorm, he didn't link the first flame out of necessity, and then personally chose to return. He is ignorance personified. Ignorance prevents him from seeing what the rekindling of the first flame has truly done. The three other Lords of Cinder have already realized this. For the world to move forward, the first flame must be let go. Holding on to ideologies from centuries or millennia past only causes further strife. This idea can even be seen in the first game, where the Chaos Witch of Izalith attempted to recreate the first flame to prevent it from dying, and it didn't work, creating demons. The world in Dark Souls 3 seems to be crumbling because people are unwilling to just let go. Settlements are being dragged into huge gaping ravines and now only exist on top of extremely large rock formations. Ash Lake and Lost Izalith have merged to form the Smoldering Lake, where we can still discover the ruins of Izalith. The Dragheap is the quintessence of this world state. It is pure chaos. Everything here is merging and colliding with each other. forming this landscape of pure ash littered with dilapidated buildings from many different eras or millennia. The world itself is dying and slowly being covered with ash. Even linking the first flame shows that the flame is nowhere near as strong as it once was, hardly managing to burn the Ashen One's body. The first flame needs to be let go, for it only brings further despair to the world. If it is let go, the people, everyone, from undead to beings of pure dark to giants, will need to live in the dark for some time. But eventually, something new will come. It might take years upon years, but it will come, whether it be a bright shining light once again, or something else entirely. This idea of letting go is what Dark Souls is really about, and it is a message that can be converted to our world perfectly. You can apply the idea of letting go to anything. Greed, violence, revenge, politics, nostalgia, anything works. For a person or mankind in general to progress, some things must be let go. But hey, I'm the guy who's currently talking about Dark Souls 3, a game made 7 years ago, so what do I know? Finding meaning in a cruel and indifferent universe and letting go are the two most important messages of the Dark Souls trilogy in my opinion. Dark Souls also tackles some other themes like identity, but these two still stand out as the main themes of Dark Souls. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate if you could subscribe. Goodbye and have a good day.